Today we're going to talk about the limitations of an appraisal license. In order to start the discussion, the first thing that we ought to talk a little bit about is the licensing process. In 1987, the Appraisal Foundation was established as part of a federal regulation that was part of the savings and loan bailout that some of you that were in the real estate business during that time may recall that there was a major financial crisis, not unlike the one that we had just recently gone through. But in that situation, instead of rates going down, rates went up to 18%, and much of the chaos was believed to have had a foundation or a start in poor appraisals. And at that time, when I started in the business, there was no licensing standard for appraisers. If you wanted to be an appraiser, you opened up an appraisal business and convinced somebody that you knew what you were talking about, and you were an appraiser. Well, in 1987, the Appraisal Foundation was established under the direction of the Appraisal Subcommittee. And the Appraisal Subcommittee was a subcommittee of the Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council. And the Appraisal Subcommittee then had three committees under their jurisdiction. They had the Appraisal Qualification Board, which the Appraisal Qualification Board is essentially designed to establish the qualification for licensing. They had the Appraisal Standards Board, which is the committee that established uniform standard of professional appraisal practice, commonly referred to as USPAP. The Appraisal Practice Board is a committee of the Appraisal Foundation that establishes best practices. Just for your information, the ASC, the Appraisal Subcommittee, does a 2-year audit in every state in the country. They have policy managers that go into each state and make sure that each state is in compliance with the various licensing requirements and standards. In the event that a state is found to be out of compliance, that state could no longer qualify for federally insured loans by state chartered lending institutions, and so it becomes critical that states find themselves in compliance. There are three basic appraisal licenses that are offered in the state of Utah. You can obtain an appraisal license, which is the lowest threshold, or you can get one of two appraisal certifications. The first is a certified residential appraiser. The second is a certified general appraiser. As a licensed appraiser, you're allowed to appraise single-family residences up to 4 units and residential-oriented land up to 4 units, with a maximum transaction amount of $1 million. As a certified residential appraiser, you are allowed to appraise any residential property with no dollar threshold, but the limitations on land remain the same. You can appraise 1 to 4 family homes and land that will support up to 4 units. As a certified general appraiser, there are no limitations on the properties that you can appraise. The uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, however, require that any appraiser doing any kind of an appraisal be competent to perform that appraisal, both geographically and property specific. A number of years ago, I was appointed by the serve on the Appraisal Board, which in Utah is officially known as the Utah Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board. Right now that's a 5-member board. 4 of the members are appraisers. 1 is a non-appraiser, which in this case is a real estate agent. While serving on that board, we had a situation come before us where a residential appraiser from Utah Valley had completed an appraisal on some multifamily land, and they'd completed the appraisal on a Fannie Mae residential lot appraisal form. The property owner was unhappy because the appraisal did not give them the answer they wanted, which isn't necessarily an unusual thing. But the problem was the appraiser had not really been working in the area in which the appraisal was done, wasn't familiar with the sales transactions in the area, and used land sales that weren't really the same kind of use. And as a result, we decided as an appraisal board that we would provide some additional clarification. So we amended the licensing requirements to be a little more specific in making sure that appraisers who had an appraisal license were better informed as what they could do with their residential license or their residential certification. So as a result of that, the limitations of a residential license or a residential appraisal license or a residential certification limits land appraisals to residential properties that would support land up to 4 units. You can refer to the licensing requirements that are found on the state of Utah's website that will specifically identify that. We found in a number of areas appraisers who have taken on land appraisal assignments that involve properties that are commercial in nature, industrial in nature, or require analysis that's outside the scope of a residential license. For example, if an appraiser is asked to appraise single-family lots, they can do that. But if part of the assignment requires the appraiser to provide a bulk value or a value that requires multiple lots, more than 4, being sold to a single buyer in a bulk value, the appraiser should not accept the assignment because that assignment requires analysis of discounted cash flow analysis, which is outside the licensing that is permitted under the residential certification or license. An appraiser is asked to appraise commercial property, and a residential appraiser shouldn't accept the assignment. The foundation of all appraisal assignments is highest and best use. And in highest and best use, there's 4 essential elements. The first is legally permissible. What can I legally do with this property? The second is physically possible. What physically will this property allow to be built on? Are there shape or terrain issues that impose limitations on the property, access to utilities and other things? Third is financial feasibility. What makes sense from a financial standpoint? What is financially feasible on this property? For example, if the market rent for a commercial building is 85 cents a square foot, but the economic rent, the rent that is required to justify an adequate return to support development of the property, is $1 a square foot, the project is not financially feasible. And then finally is the productive use of the property. Are the improvements that are found on the property the most productive use? And in many cases the issue may be either that the improvements require renovation or remodeling to be put to their highest and best use, or there may be situations where there is either excess or surplus land associated with the property. As a residential appraiser, they have not received the training to be able to perform the highest and best use on non-residential properties. For example, if I'm not routinely doing industrial or commercial properties, it would be difficult, if not impossible, for me to do a credible highest and best use analysis in terms of financial feasibility. If you're an appraiser who has been asked to perform an appraisal on something that is not residential in character, you shouldn't accept the assignment. Now, you may affiliate with a certified general appraiser who has the experience and competency necessary to do the assignment, in which case you can participate in the process and work towards a general certification. As a person or entity that is looking to obtain appraisal services, you want to make sure that the appraiser that's being engaged to perform the appraisal has the appropriate licensing. Ultimately, it's the appraiser's responsibility to notify the person engaging the appraiser to do the appraisal, to let them know that they're either qualified and competent to do the assignment or they're not. And the appraiser is the individual who stands the liability in the event that there's a problem. There are still a number of appraisers who are performing appraisals outside the scope of their license, and it exposes them to potential licensing action by the Division of Real Estate. I hope this information is of use to you, and if you ever have any questions relative to licensing, you can contact the Division of Real Estate. Mark Fagergren is the person that is over licensing in the state of Utah, or feel free to contact me, Craig Morley, at Morley & McConkey. You can find us on the web and send me an email, and would be happy to help. All the best.